Hey guys, welcome back to RotoBaller. I am Pierre, the lead editor for NFL and MLB at RotoBaller.com, and I'm here to give you my picks for wide receiver at Week 13. Some start sits. Look, you know the obvious guys, don't have to talk about, and then there's some players that should just never be mentioned on this broadcast or anywhere. But there's some fringe guys that you don't know, streamers, right? Injury replacements, some guys you just can't trust. Who do you fill in? Who do you trust this week? I'm going to tell you, starting with my top three must starts from guys in that kind of wide receiver 3 4 flex range. And let's go with Brandon Aiyuk, although admittedly he's kind of worked his way up to at least a solid wide receiver 3. And now with Deebo Samuel sadly out, Brandon Aiyuk is a solid wide receiver 2, at least for this week. We don't know what the usage is going to be like going forward. But against Seattle, now I know you think Seattle, terrible defense, terrible secondary. That was the case early in the year. They've done a lot better the last few weeks. What they haven't been good at is offense. That seems to be kind of an issue for them. But anyways, I think this is a big Elijah Mitchell game, but they have to pass the ball too. And without Deebo, you know it's going to be Aiyuk a lot. So Seattle, it's not that the matchup is just so juicy that you have to start any receiver against them. But Aiyuk had been really coming on lately anyways. 3 of the last 4 games, even with Deebo getting all of those touches, he had gone over 85 yards receiving. So I think you can imagine the floor is pretty high with him. And again, he's not going to be Deebo. Nobody is Deebo. But Aiyuk, you have to lock him into your lineup. No worries. What about Hunter Renfrow? He's been as solid as he can get, a high floor guy. You know, that ceiling we haven't really seen, but we're starting to see it because last week was his season high, 134 yards on 8 catches, and no coincidence that came with Darren Waller leaving the game early. So, well, Darren Waller is going to be out again this week. It looks like Hunter Renfrow is a must start because I'm not saying he's going to go 134 yards. We don't know that, but it is Washington. We know Washington bottom 5 in terms of fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. So you got to keep him in there, especially in full PPR leagues. Washington allowing the 4th most fantasy points to receivers, actually. And Renfrow is going to get targeted a ton, just like he has all season. So this is a very solid play. Now, in standard leagues, he does lose a little bit of appeal just because he's not getting in the end zone too much. But also helps that Josh Jacobs has been banged up in practice this week. Not sure if the running game will be at full capacity. So again, Renfrow, set and forget. I think you will be fine pretty much any format. And then Chase Claypool has been very up and down, just like that whole Steelers offense. So why do I like Claypool this week? You might notice the last couple weeks he's coming on, getting a lot of usage. He's gotten 17 targets the last 2 weeks. 92 and 83 yards. And we know that also it comes with some lows, right? He could go for 20 yards, 30 yards. It just kind of depends. Well, Baltimore doesn't seem like a great matchup for him, right? Their defense has been not what it usually is. But still, if you look at last week and last couple of weeks, they're really starting to come around. But that's more so because the way they're scheming against teams, especially the opponents they've had the last couple of weeks, they know just to shut down the run and they're not too much worried about the passing game. They could do that against teams like the Bears. All right. Now, Baltimore is actually 24th in DVOA against the pass. All right, and this is a team that employs primarily a man defense. Chase Claypool is more effective against that, and he can definitely beat some guys downfield. It's going to be kind of a big player bust for him. We know that's just how he is, but there's a good chance that he does. By the way, Baltimore's secondary also dealing with some injuries. I have the feeling Baltimore is going to stick to what they've been doing lately that's been working. They're going to totally focus on Najee Harris and the running game and try to take that out and then force Pittsburgh to beat them with Ben Roethlisberger and what's left of his arm. All right. I think it'll work. I think Baltimore wins his game, but I think Claypool can bust loose for a big play or two. So I like his chances more so than the Steelers in general. I'm kind of down on Najee Harris this week. Of course, you have to start him, but I do think that Claypool has a nice chance this week for a big game. Now, I don't like the chance for Jamar Chase, which sounds crazy, but you might have noticed it too. In the last 4 games, he hasn't even reached 50 yards. He has gotten in the end zone a couple times, but that's not what you're hoping for the guy who is lighting up the league in his first few games. It's all about the deep ball with him, right? So he could hit at any time. It's so hard to sit him because you don't want to miss out on that big play. it's always possible, right? Yeah, sure, it's possible here, but the Chargers, again, we know that this is a run funnel defense. They will have very little trouble running. The way Joe Mixon has been running the ball, I mean, you've got to love his chances of another huge game, right? Mixon against that defensive line. And they've been riding Mixon the last couple weeks. That's why Bengals have been so good, right? They're not exposing their defense. And Mixon getting season high carries the last 2 weeks. So the volume might not be there for Chase. The deep ball, it might not be there either, just based on the strength of this secondary. The Chargers are allowing the second fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers as well. So all that told, yeah, there's always a chance Chase does slip by the secondary and outrun the safeties. But again, you're really rolling the dice here. So if you have a better option with a higher floor, I would choose it. And likewise, this goes with DK Metcalf. So it really pains me to see what has happened to him. Not really through his own fault, but this offense, as I already mentioned, not too good these days. We know this. But then you might say, okay, well, Russ is still kind of working his way back from the injury. The lack of a running game obviously is a problem, right? There's offensive wide issues. The offensive line, well, it's never really good in Seattle. But then why is Tyler Lockett able to have big games, right? He's going over 100 yards. He's still getting his. So why is Metcalf doing absolutely nothing? Now, the last 2 weeks, I was saying, well, at least DK's getting those targets, right? 8 targets in each of the first 2 games since Russ came back after the bye. Didn't even happen last week. Despite the fact that they were losing pretty much the whole game, only 4 targets. He only caught 1 pass for 13 yards, and that was at the very end on that final drive where they just kind of needed to throw it to somebody before Swain is the one who gets a touchdown. But anyways, DK Metcalf, it just doesn't seem to be on Russ's mind too much anymore. Some people have some interesting theories, maybe the OnlyFans thing. Russ is maybe not looking his way as much. I'm not going to get into all that. But all I know is that DK Metcalf, until you see the results, as talented as he is, it doesn't matter if Russ is on his back half the time. If they don't have an offense that's going to let him, work down the field and get open because Russ is running for his life or the defense doesn't respect the run game. And this is not a good matchup. The 49ers defensively have really come on the last couple of games. So I'm going to sit DK Metcalf until I see something different. And of course, the minute I sit him, he'll probably have 2 touchdowns. But so be it. All right, hopefully it doesn't happen to you. Hopefully you make the right decisions. That's why I'm here to try to help always. Check out RotoBaller.com all weekend long for the best advice. You know where it's at right here.